This video contains spoilers for Obscur Expedition 33. If you haven't played the game, you should close this video right now. The story begins in 2019. Guillaume Broche, who was a developer at Ubisoft, found himself increasingly frustrated with rigid hierarchies and the risk-averse nature of traditional AAA production cycles. He started to experiment with Unreal Engine during his off hours, dedicating upwards of 8 hours a day to a personal prototype after finishing his regular shifts, so that he could recapture the emotions he felt from the JRPGs that defined his youth. This early prototype was titled We Lost, and served as the technical sandbox where the core mechanics of the reactive turn-based combat and the foundational characters, who would retain their names into the final release, were first born. In his solo dev journey, he had to put in extreme hours just to maintain the momentum of his vision for several years. The project expanded when he reached out to his longtime friend and programmer, Tom Gilliman, to refine the prototype's reactive combat logic. Soon after, Francois Marouz joined the duo, leaving his established career to provide the executive and operational structure necessary to form a legitimate studio. And thus, Sandfall Interactive was founded in Montpellier, France. During their early days, the core team worked without salaries for the first year, surviving on passion and the belief that they were onto something that was different than other games. This lack of any finance at all was stabilized by angel investors who recognized the potential in Broche's vision, allowing the studio to formalize its structure and hire employees. Their approach to recruitment was distinct. Rather than assembling a team of industry veterans with predetermined methodologies, Broche sought out individuals who possessed passion over pedigree. He envisioned the studio's growth as an RPG party, where different members brought unique classes of skills that were not always traditional to the gaming sector. This philosophy led to the recruitment of theater artists, guitar teachers, and private equity professionals, many of whom were junior developers or entirely new to the medium. One of the most notable anecdotes is the studio's recruitment of lead writer Jennifer Sweetberg-Yen. During the COVID-19 lockdown, Jennifer was working in private equity, but harbored a desire to transition into creative writing. She discovered a casting call for narrative writers on Reddit and submitted a sample that eventually won over the founders. Her lack of prior game writing experience was viewed not as a deficit, but as an opportunity for a fresh literary perspective on the genre's tropes. Similarly, lead composer Lorien Testard was discovered on SoundCloud while working as a guitar teacher, having never previously composed for a commercial game project. This unconventional assembly was critical in maintaining the game's sincere tone. Art director Nicolas Maxson Francombe brought a background in circus arts and theater, specifically his experience with Cirque du Soleil, to the project's visual design. This resulted in a world heavily influenced by Belle Epoque aesthetics, Victorian motifs, and Art Deco, creating a dreamlike, painterly atmosphere that distinguished the game from gritty realism or high fantasy archetypes. The core team stabilized at approximately 33 people, a number that resonated with the game's title and central lore, proving that a lean, focused group could achieve AAA quality output without the communication overhead of 500-person departments. The inspiration for Lumiere's Gommage was personal. Broche once asked his mother what the worst possible thing that could happen to her would be, to which she replied, to lose you. This primal fear of loss of your children by parents became the emotional fuel for the narrative, framing the quest not as a power fantasy but as an existential journey of volunteers willing to die to ensure the next generation could live. Jennifer integrated this with her own short story about an artist who could enter her own paintings. Jennifer's writing process involved her inhabiting every character to understand their perspectives, because this game avoided the traditional good versus evil tropes, instead focusing on conflicts arising from differing views on sacrifice and duty. For Gustav, she authored 4 generations of family history to ground him in the city's founding families, ensuring the weight of the past was felt in every decision. In an era of absurd video game development costs, Expedition 33 stands out with a budget of less than $10 million for production, while delivering a game comparable to or even better than studios with $200 million budgets. Being a turn-based game helped with the cost, as it required significantly fewer animations and physics interactions compared to an action game. Instead of making a massive open world with a bunch of stuff, they focused on a miniature world map that provided a sense of grand scale and exploration without the need for detailed assets across every square meter. The core combat animations were handled by a small team of 8 specialists in Korea. When they partnered with Kepler Interactive, the publisher provided Sandfall with centralized HR, legal, and IT services without adding a lot of bloat like other publishers do to studios. This allowed them to remain lean and focused on the creative product. This efficiency translated into a stunning profit margin of 45 to 55%, far exceeding the industry average of 18%. The game's sub-$50 price point was a strategic choice to manage player expectations for its AA scope, though the final quality of the game exceeded that by far. During development, the studio transitioned from Unreal Engine 4 to Unreal Engine 5, which gave them access to powerful new features like Nanite and Lumen, but also presented what technical director Tom Gilliman called the trap of AAA quality. Because the engine could produce photorealistic results, the audience began to expect that across the board, a standard that a 33-person team struggled to meet. The transition to Lumen Global Illumination completely ruined the carefully calibrated lighting the art team had built in Unreal Engine 4. Every location in the game had to be manually retuned to achieve the intended painterly look. To combat the resource strain of building assets, the team used free monthly asset packs from Epic Games and then retextured and remodeled them to fit the Bellapog theme. They focused their labor on landmark architecture while being comfortable with good enough rocks and background foliage. One of the most famous behind-the-scenes stories involves the game's motion capture. During a session for one of the game's more stationary bosses, the team used a simple water bottle as a prop for the actors to interact with. Maxence Cazorla, the actor for Esquier, performed intense emotional scenes directed at the bottle, which served as a focus point for the final digital character. While Expedition 33 identified as a JRPG, its combat mechanics were heavily influenced by the high-stakes timing of Soulsborne titles. The reactive turn-based system required players to do more than just select commands from a menu. Every enemy attack could be dodged or parried with precise timing, and parrying resulted in devastating counterattacks. This interactivity kept players engaged even during the enemy's turn. Skills often featured quick-time events that increased their effectiveness, and the depth of build strategy allowed for broken character builds that even the developers hadn't anticipated. Boss fights were designed as multi-phase strategic encounters rather than simple damage sponges, requiring players to learn patterns. The technical implementation of this on consoles was a point of debate. Digital Foundry's analysis revealed that while the PS5 could maintain a dynamic 1512p at 30 FPS or 1080p at 60 FPS, the Xbox Series S version was forced to make significant compromises, including the removal of lumen reflections and a hard 30 FPS lock. Because the combat relied so heavily on timing, many critics recommended the 60 FPS performance mode as the only viable way to play for serious challenges. Obscur Expedition 33 launched on April 24, 2025 into a crowded market. Its release was just 2 days after The Elder Scrolls IV Oblivion Remastered was shadow-dropped, a timing that many industry analysts feared would bury the new IP. However, the game instead became a runaway success fueled by word of mouth that spread like wildfire. The decision to launch on Game Pass also helped, as it lowered the barrier of entry for players who were hesitant about the turn-based genre, allowing them to give it a try without financial risk. Once players were hooked by the prologue, the game's visibility exploded. It became the biggest new third-party launch on Game Pass in 2025, outperforming even the highly anticipated Hollow Knight Silksong. The game's sales trajectory was a series of fitting milestones. It sold 1 million copies in 3 days and hit the 3.3 million copies sold figure in exactly 33 days. By October, it had surpassed 5 million units, proving that inclusion in a subscription service did not significantly hurt direct sales on other platforms. Despite its critical and commercial sweep, there have been some controversies. The Indie Game Awards committee discovered that Sandfall had used generative AI tools to create environmental textures during the crunch of final production. This was exacerbated by conflicting statements. Initially, the studio had claimed no Gen AI was used, but a July interview with the producer in Alpine admitted to some AI, but not much. While Sandfall argued that these were merely placeholder textures that were eventually patched out with human-created assets, the Indie Game Awards retracted the Indie Debut Game and Indie Game of the Year awards from Expedition 33. This is not to be confused with the Game Awards hosted by Geoff Keighley, which maintained the game's nominations and wins. Now I know what you're thinking. Why was Expedition 33, a AA game with a $10 million budget, even part of the Indie Game Awards? The answer is, I have no clue. Speaking of Geoff and the Game Awards, Expedition 33 had a record-breaking 12 nominations, the most for any title since Baldur's Gate 3, and by the end it had secured 9 awards, including Game of the Year. The victory was seen as a historic first for a French title, prompting a second round of congratulations from the French presidency. The game's soundtrack had already amassed 333 million streams on digital platforms and was hailed as a masterpiece that wove the game together. In the present day, Sandfall has launched a thank you update for Expedition 33, which added new story scenes and endgame challenges. While there are discussions underway for a follow-up project, the studio's leadership has been adamant that they will not scale up to become a bloated AAA entity. The success of Expedition 33 proved that the AA model is not a step down from AAA, but rather a more sustainable and creative alternative. For Guillaume Broch, the journey from working 16 hours a day between Ubisoft and his bedroom to standing on the stage as the creator of the Game of the Year is a testament to the fact that, in his words, the sky is truly the limit for games built with passion. And that was the story of Expedition 33. I am Darky, thanks for watching.